Long ago, in the heart of the sun-kissed savannah, there existed a mighty kingdom ruled by King Ikandeo, a kind-hearted leader known for his fairness and generosity. The villagers called his land the Marula Kingdom, famed for its lush baobab trees and the sweet fruits that nourished its people year after year. Flanked by the rolling golden plains and blessed with gentle rains, Marula Kingdom was a place of abundance and joy. For many years, King Ikandeo and his beloved wife, Queen Nambala, prayed for a child. They often visited the sacred groves under the ancient baobabs, leaving offerings of Marula fruit and millet before the spirits, asking to be blessed with an heir. One evening, as dusk wrapped the kingdom in a warm, purple sky, a wandering griot, storyteller, arrived at the palace gates. He chanted old songs of hope and prophesied that soon, a child would be born, destined for great things. The king and queen felt hope ignite in their hearts once more. Shortly after, Queen Nambala discovered she was expecting. Months passed and, with each rising sun, the people of Marula Kingdom could sense the excitement growing in the palace. When the time came for the queen to give birth, the entire kingdom celebrated, setting up colorful canopies in the village squares. Drummers from nearby regions gathered to play their rhythms day and night, while children danced around the fires, singing to welcome the long-awaited princess. At last, Queen Nambala delivered a daughter. Her skin was as smooth and radiant as freshly polished ebony, and her eyes sparkled like the sun's reflection on a river at dawn. Because of her shining presence and the warmth she brought into every room, the queen named her Zuri, a name meaning beautiful in their language. Though joy filled the palace corridors, and ill wind soon followed, the queen grew weak after childbirth. Skilled herbalists and medicine women came from distant lands with potions and remedies, but to no avail. Before dawn of the seventh day, Queen Nambala passed away, leaving King Ikandeo to mourn and raise his daughter alone. Under the brilliant African sunrise, King Ikandeo gazed upon his infant daughter, her laughter like a bell tinkling through the quiet, sorrowful halls. In his grief, he vowed never to let harm come to the child who so reminded him of his cherished queen. Yet, fate had different plans. The Marula Kingdom would soon face new challenges, beginning with an unexpected visitor at the palace gates. Unbeknownst to them all, this arrival would sow the seeds of envy and danger that would change Zuri's life forever. As word spread across the vast plains that King Ikandeo was left to rule alone with his infant daughter, royal messengers and dignitaries from neighboring kingdoms began to arrive at the Marula Kingdom's gates. Each brought condolences, gifts, and offers of alliance. The king, still mourning Queen Nambala, struggled to receive so many visitors, but he knew his duty was to protect and strengthen the realm for young Princess Zuri. Among these visitors was a refined and mysterious noblewoman from the distant kingdom of Katembo, Lady Kamali. She was tall, poised, and adorned in gold bangles that jingled like distant rain each time she moved her slender arms. Her garments were woven from the finest Ken cloth, shimmering with colors of deep red, royal purple, and ebony black. At her side traveled a retinue of guards dressed in matching attire, silent and stern. Days of diplomatic talks turned into weeks, and over time, Lady Kamali began to offer comfort and friendship to King Ikandeo. She spoke softly of wanting to help him carry the burdens of the kingdom, noting that the people needed a caring queen by his side. The king, longing for companionship and a mother figure for Zuri, found himself drawn to Lady Kamali's graceful presence and unwavering confidence. Soon, under pressure from advisors who feared Marula Kingdom might appear vulnerable without a queen, King Ikandeo agreed to marry Lady Kamali. A grand ceremony was planned. Musicians and praise singers from all corners of the Marula Kingdom filled the palace courtyard. Drums echoed across the savannah at sunset, and the sky glowed in hues of crimson and gold. The entire kingdom turned out to witness the celebration, hopeful that this union would restore joy and stability after the queen's passing. Yet, as dusk cast long shadows on the palace walls, a subtle unease grew in the hearts of some who watched Lady Kamali's still, assessing gaze upon the young princess. There was a quiet intensity behind her kind smile, an unreadable aura that seemed to slip into the night. For hidden within Lady Kamali's ornate luggage was a mystical relic known only in hushed whispers throughout the region, the ebony mirror. She alone knew its power, a power that would soon entwine her fate with that of Princess Zuri in ways the kingdom could never have foreseen. From the day she stepped foot into the Marula kingdom, Lady Kamali had carried herself with an elegant composure that seemed perfectly suited for a queen. As the palace settled into the rhythm of life after King Ikandeo's marriage, servants scurried through the corridors, tending to her needs and adjusting to her meticulous standards. Weeks blended into months, and young Princess Zuri grew from a toddling infant into a curious child who roamed the palace gardens with boundless energy and an insatiable sense of wonder. The first sign of Lady Kamali's more secretive nature appeared late one night, long after the royal family had retired to their chambers. A palace guard, making his routine rounds, witnessed a slender figure gliding through the corridor, candlelight dancing on gold jewelry. She carried a small, cloth-wrapped bundle in her arms. The guard froze, silently bowing, and she passed without even glancing his way. Though his curiosity stirred, he knew better than to follow a queen uninvited. Moments later, he heard the faint creak of a door shutting in the depths of the palace. Unbeknownst to most, Lady Kamali had chosen a disused storeroom near the palace's eastern wing as her private retreat. There, she kept the object that had journeyed with her from the kingdom of Katembo, the ebony mirror. Its frame was intricately carved from black wood, etched with symbols of serpents and stars that seemed to shift in the wavering glow of candlelight. The mirror's surface was smooth as obsidian, reflecting its surroundings with unnerving clarity. That night, once she was certain she was alone, Kamali carefully unwrapped the mirror. She breathed in the musty air of the storeroom, her heart fluttering with anticipation. She had been waiting for an auspicious moment, when the moon was high, and her spirit brimming with restless energy, to invoke the mirror's power. She lit a few sticks of myrrh incense, the aromatic smoke curling around her face, and placed them in a small earthen bowl at her feet. Sinking onto a woven reed mat, she extended one graceful hand to trace the carved symbols along the blackwood frame. She whispered an incantation taught to her by her family's elder seers, words that resonated in the hush of the night. Slowly, the surface of the mirror began to ripple like inky water disturbed by a pebble's throw. A faint, luminous glow radiated from within, casting an otherworldly light on Kamali's face. "Ebony mirror," she whispered, her voice shaking with desire, "reveal to me the future of our kingdom and my rightful place upon its throne. Show me who is revered above all others in beauty and grace." For a moment, there was no sound but the crackle of the incense and Kamali's own trembling breath. Then, a soft voice emanated from the shifting surface, echoing as though it came from deep within an ancient well. "You, Kamali, stand tall in wisdom and beauty. Yet there is one whose radiance surpasses even yours, a bud soon to blossom into a flower of unmatched grace, the Princess Zuri." Kamali's slender fingers dug into the edges of the mirror as a wave of fury coursed through her veins. She had suspected as much. Zuri's every giggle and kind smile seemed to enchant everyone around her, from the lowliest servant to the highest court official. King Ikandeo cherished his daughter above all else, showering her with attention and affection that Kamali secretly envied. But to hear it voiced by the mirror's power, that was more than she could bear. She exhaled shakily, wrestling her rage into composure. "A mere child," she murmured, her voice strained, "and already she is destined to outshine me. No. I won't let that happen." Biting her lower lip, she wrapped the mirror once again in the cloth, extinguishing its glow. She sat in silence for a long moment, heart pounding, before carefully locking the ebony mirror away. The next morning, palace life resumed as usual. Sunlight filtered through the wide windows, gilding the marble floors in soft gold. Servants hurried about with baskets of fresh maize and sheaves of sorghum to be ground in the courtyard. Drums pulsed in the distance, some traveling musicians were entertaining villagers in the marketplace, adding a festive backdrop to the day. Kamali, regal and refined, appeared at the breakfast table beside the king. Dressed in her vibrant Kent cloth robes, she smiled politely at the assembled courtiers, though her eyes flickered warily in Princess Zuri's direction. On the surface, nothing was amiss. The queen placed a tender hand on Zuri's head, an outward gesture of motherly affection. Zuri beamed, delighted by any scrap of kindness from the woman she was trying to accept as a parent. King Ikandeo, preoccupied with matters of state, saw only a welcome sign of unity in his household. But beneath Kamali's mask of grace lay a creeping sense of determination and jealousy. She could not forget the mirror's pronouncement. She found herself scrutinizing the princess's every gesture, the bright intelligence in the child's eyes, the easy way she made others smile, and the way her skin glowed in the morning light, a testament to the spirit of Queen Nambula, whose memory still warmed the hearts of all. Day by day, Kamali's envy grew, fueled by every kind word spoken about Zuri. She would politely dismiss the praises to maintain her cover, but privately, her thoughts circled back to the ebony mirror's prophecy. She found excuses to isolate the princess from large gatherings, subtly directing King Ikandeo's attention elsewhere. If a festival was declared, Kamali contrived to keep Zuri inside, claiming the child must rest or study. If visitors arrived with gifts for the princess, Kamali quietly intercepted them, ensuring they never reached the little girl's eager hands. For Zuri, the sudden shift was perplexing. She sensed an undercurrent of tension whenever the queen was near, yet she could not decipher its source. Though her father doted on her, palace life was complicated by Kamali's watchful gaze. Zuri escaped whenever she could to play in the gardens or visit the stables to feed the regal sables and the swift-footed antelopes. She found solace in nature's embrace, chasing butterflies under the baobab tree or listening to the melodious calls of the hornbills perched on its highest branches. Meanwhile, Kamali began planning her next step. She reasoned that if she could not bend Zuri's fate to her will, then she would find a way to remove her altogether. Each evening, she consulted the ebony mirror, seeking guidance and assurance that her path would secure her status as the most admired woman in all the land. With every answer pointing to Zuri as the thorn in her side, Kamali's resolve hardened. In the darkest corner of the palace, beyond the reach of day's warmth, a quiet malevolence took root in the queen's heart. Little did King Ikandeo or the cheerful princess suspect that the queen's facade of gentleness concealed a heart twisted by envy. And in that hidden chamber, the ebony mirror awaited its next summons, ready to play its part in the ominous destiny unfolding for Princess Zuri and the entire Marula kingdom. The first hint of rainy season arrived one evening in the Marula kingdom, thunder rolling across the distant plains, lightning streaking the skies over the tall, swaying grasses. Within the palace walls, King Ikandeo retired early, tired from a day of diplomatic meetings. Princess Zuri, now a lively young girl of 10 years, lingered at one of the grand windows in a quiet corridor, watching the flashes illuminate the courtyard. She felt both awe and a slight trembling excitement at nature's show. Moments later, a handmaiden gently guided her to her chamber. Little did Zuri know that across the palace halls, Queen Kamali's late-night scheming was about to reach its apex. Kamali had grown increasingly restless. Every day, she observed the way Zuri's smile captivated the people, the softness in the child's voice when she greeted servants, her eagerness to visit the stable hands, her exuberant laughter brightening every corridor. Servants whispered admiringly about Zuri's kindness, how she seemed to have inherited the warmth and compassion of her late mother, Queen Nambula. All of this only fanned the flames of Kamali's envy. She obsessed over the ebony mirror's prophecy and returned to her secret storeroom night after night, demanding reassurance that she was the fairest in the land. Yet, the mirror's reply remained unwavering. Zuri alone outshone her. One night, after the thunder had rumbled away, Kamali summoned a man named Sanusi, a skilled tracker who had once served her family in Kotembo. He arrived discreetly through the servants' entrance, guided by Kamali's personal guard. Unlike the palace soldiers, who bore bright-crested shields and swords, Sanusi wore muted earth-toned garments suited for blending into the bush. His stance was tense yet respectful before the queen. "Sanusi," Kamali said, her voice low and resolute as she beckoned him closer, "I have a delicate task that requires your unmatched skills. Princess Zuri is to be taken on a journey outside the palace grounds, to the furthest reaches of the savannah, beyond the baobab groves. There, you must ensure that she does not return." For a moment, Sanusi's stoic features wavered. He had heard rumors of Kamali's jealousy and ambition, but to be asked to rid the kingdom of an innocent child was far worse than he anticipated. Still, as a man in debt to Kamali's family, and with the threat of her hidden power looming over him, he dared not refuse. "Your Majesty," he managed to reply. "What proof shall I bring that the deed is done?" Kamali reached into a small wooden chest and retrieved a leather pouch. "Bring me her beaded necklace," she said, voice cold as steel. It was a gift from the king, made by local artisans. "Only I know its unique design. Return with that, and I will know you have carried out my orders." At dawn, when the sunlight had turned the sky a pale pink over the thatched village roofs, Kamali instructed Zuri to accompany Sanusi on a special outing. She claimed that the king wished for her to learn the ways of the land, a fatherly attempt to prepare her for the responsibilities of a princess. At first, Zuri was thrilled. She adored going beyond the palace gates to see the world outside. She threw a light shawl over her shoulders and fastened her precious beaded necklace around her neck. With a cheerful wave to the palace guards, she and Sanusi set off on foot, slipping through the tall grass and into the savannah. As they journeyed further, Zuri's curious eyes darted from one marvel to another, a herd of elephants in the distance spraying water from their trunks, a flock of bright lilac-breasted rollers taking flight, and a lone giraffe nibbling leaves from an acacia tree. Despite Sanusi's stern demeanor, Zuri attempted to chat with him about the wonders they passed along the way. Eventually, the pair reached a remote region where ancient Marula and baobab trees grew in twisted shapes, their branches casting gnarled shadows on the ground. Thick undergrowth cluttered the forest floor, and vines draped from every limb. Sanusi paused, his heart hammering. A hush seemed to settle over the air. Zuri glanced around, curious why they had ventured so far from the well-known pathways. "Wait here," Sanusi ordered brusquely. He surveyed the area, searching for a place suitably hidden from prying eyes. Though he had braced himself for this moment, the sight of the princess, wide-eyed and brimming with youthful innocence, was almost too much to bear. She smiled at him expectantly, trusting that he only intended to show her something extraordinary in the forest. The memory of her earlier laughter tugged at his conscience. Slowly, he reached for his dagger, the blade glinting dully in the sparse sunlight. As he turned to face her, every cautionary tale he had ever heard rushed through his mind. Princess Zuri stood before him, a fragile life so beloved by the kingdom. A child as innocent as the morning dew. The weight of his mission felt like a millstone around his neck. "Princess," Sanusi said, swallowing hard. "Forgive me, but his words faltered. Torn between loyalty to the queen's deadly command and pity for the young girl, he struggled to force his next breath. Zuri sensed his turmoil. Alarm flickered in her dark eyes. She took a cautious step back, confusion etched on her face. "What's wrong?" she asked softly. "Why do you look so sad?" Sanusi's grip on the dagger trembled. He thought of the darkness lurking in Kamali's ambition, and then of King Ikandeo's kindness. Finally, he realized he could not commit this vile act. He dropped to one knee, lowering the dagger in the dust. "Princess, you must run," he whispered, urgent and trembling. "The queen, she ordered me to end your life. I was to return with your necklace as proof. But I cannot do this. You must flee, disappear into the forest. Never return to the palace while the queen rules." Tears welled in Zuri's eyes. The revelation was like a stabbing betrayal. Yet amid her shock, she understood she had no choice but to trust the remorseful tracker's warning. Her heart pounded with fear, but she summoned her courage. Sanusi removed his own beaded wristband, similar in color to Zuri's necklace, and placed it in his satchel. "I will deliver this to the queen in place of yours," he explained hurriedly, telling her, "I found it on your remains. That may buy you time." With tears streaming down her face, Zuri removed her necklace and pressed it into Sanusi's hand. "I cannot keep this," she said, voice trembling, "or anyone who sees it will know who I am." Sanusi nodded. "Gods protect you, princess. Now, hurry." A tearful goodbye passed between them, and then Zuri ran, plunging deeper into the dense forest. The wind carried the rustle of her footsteps away, leaving Sanusi alone, overwhelmed by both relief and dread. He knew he would face dire consequences if the queen ever discovered his deceit. But the innocence in Zuri's eyes had forced him to choose compassion over cruelty. Somewhere behind them, thunder rumbled again in the distance, heralding the rainy season's approach. It seemed a fitting symbol of the dark storm gathering in the Marula kingdom, one that would rage as long as Queen Kamali's envy remained unchecked. Meanwhile, Princess Zuri vanished among the towering baobabs, her fate uncertain, her hope now resting in the wilds of the African savannah. With each frantic step, Princess Zuri plunged deeper into the uncharted regions of the Marula kingdom's vast savannah forest. Her shawl snagged on thorny branches, and clusters of tall grass whipped against her arms and legs, leaving tiny scratches. Yet she hardly felt the stinging pain. Her heart pounded relentlessly, still echoing the shock of Sanusi's confession. Queen Kamali wanted her gone, never to return. Every so often, Zuri glanced over her shoulder, expecting a band of palace guards to burst through the undergrowth. But the only sounds were the gentle hum of cicadas and the wind sighing through the twisted trunks of ancient baobabs. Above, the canopy of wide leaves broke the sunlight into dappled patterns on the forest floor, and towering trees stretched as far as her eyes could see. Though she was truly alone for the first time in her life, Zuri felt a curious mix of fear and resolve. She knew she had no choice but to keep going. The day wore on, and the sun's heat became oppressive. With no water to quench her thirst, Zuri paused near a slender stream slicing through a cluster of tall reeds. She knelt, cupping her hands to scoop cool, clear water to her lips. Her reflection shimmered in the ripples, a young girl with exhausted eyes, smudges of dirt on her cheeks, and hair disheveled from hours of running. The thirst sated, she rose unsteadily, determined to find shelter before nightfall. As dusk approached, the forest shadows grew long and menacing. Strange calls echoed from somewhere in the thick brush, howls, hoots, and the occasional rustling of unseen creatures. Zuri's heart lurched with every sudden noise, but she pressed on, pushing past creeping vines and gnarled tree roots. She understood that if she stopped moving, fear might paralyze her. At last, when her legs could carry her no farther, she stumbled into a small clearing. Soft moonlight spilled into the open space, illuminating a modest structure woven from thick reeds and mud bricks, a hut of sorts, dwarfed by an enormous baobab that seemed to guard it. An old wooden door creaked on a hinge that had clearly weathered the elements. It was the first sign of human habitation Zuri had seen in many hours. Timidly, she approached. She tapped once on the door. Silence. She tapped again, then pressed her ear against the rough surface. No answer. Summoning what remained of her courage, she gave the door a gentle push. It swung open to reveal a single, dimly lit room. A few clay pots lined one wall, a small fire pit occupied the center, and a row of hand-woven sleeping mats were laid neatly along the opposite side. Zuri hesitated, it seemed wrong to intrude. Yet exhaustion and desperation overpowered her manners. Stepping inside, she latched the door behind her. She located a gourd of water near the fire pit and drank sparingly, fearful of consuming too much of a stranger's provisions. Then she settled on one of the mats, tucking her legs beneath her and wishing she had a warm blanket. Minutes stretched into an hour. Despite her racing thoughts, fatigue eventually conquered all. She dozed off, lulled by the soft crackle of coals in the fire pit and the croaking chorus of frogs in the distance. Zuri stirred to the rumble of low voices outside the hut. Feet shuffled against the ground, and someone whispered, "Who left the door latched?" A jolt of fear tore through her. She sat up, blinking in the dim interior. Silhouettes moved against the thin reed walls. There were several of them, more than 2 or 3, from the sound of it. The door pushed inward, revealing a line of diminutive figures, each carrying a torch or lantern that cast dancing shadows. There were men and women of modest stature, each wearing practical clothing suited to forest living, simple wraps of patterned cloth, short spears or carved walking sticks slung over their shoulders. Their faces, now lit by flickering firelight, showed expressions of alarm, and no small measure of caution, at discovering a stranger in their home. "Who are you?" asked one, a man with a broad forehead and a wary squint. His voice resonated with quiet authority. Startled, Zuri scrambled to her feet. Her eyes darted to the door, measuring the distance in case she needed to flee. But exhaustion still weighed on her muscles. Bowing her head respectfully, she answered, her voice trembling, "My name is Zuri. I was lost in the forest and needed a place to stay. I am so sorry for trespassing." Behind the man, the others exchanged uncertain glances. An older woman with tightly braided hair stepped forward. "You're lucky we came home when we did. This forest can be dangerous at night, child. Tell us, how did you find yourself out here, alone?" A torrent of emotions rose in Zuri's throat. She struggled to piece together a coherent explanation. Should she reveal her identity as the princess? What if word reached Queen Kamali that she was still alive? Yet these people had shown her no harm, perhaps honesty was the best path. "My father is the king," she began shakily. "I had to flee the palace because the new queen wishes me dead." Silence fell in the hut. "A palace tracker spared my life," Zuri continued. "I had no choice but to run, or she would have me killed. Please, I don't mean to involve you in my troubles. She choked back tears. "I need somewhere safe, at least for a while." Her words hung in the silence, thick with tension and disbelief. This cluster of strangers glanced at one another, eyes flickering in the torchlight. To claim to be the princess was no small statement. They all understood the potential danger that came with harboring royalty marked for death. Yet they also saw the genuine terror and fatigue in Zuri's face. The broad forehead man exhaled slowly, as though weighing the consequences. Then the older woman stepped closer and laid a gentle hand on Zuri's shoulder. "We are the 7 guardians of these woods, forest dwellers and keepers of its sacred sites," she said in a soothing tone. "If what you say is true, it is our duty, and our calling, to protect the innocent. You may remain with us, for now." Zuri's knees nearly gave out with relief. She bowed her head again, her voice a rasping whisper. Thank you so much." The group guided her to a stool near the fire pit. Another guardian, a soft-spoken man with kind eyes, offered her a bowl of stew. Starving, she sipped eagerly, feeling warmth spread through her limbs. Yet even as her fear ebbed, the gravity of her new circumstances loomed over her. She was a runaway princess, living under the constant shadow of Kamali's hatred. For that night, at least, Zuri was safe. The guardians placed fresh mats around the fire pit, giving her a sense of belonging and comfort. Outside, the moonlit forest hummed with nocturnal life. And somewhere beyond those towering baobabs, the Marula kingdom continued on, unaware that the rightful heir slept under a humble roof among 7 forest dwellers, her fate now bound up with theirs in ways none could yet foresee. Morning broke over the forest like molten gold. Rays of sunlight filtered through the thick canopy of leaves, casting dappled patterns on the ground where Princess Zuri awoke among her 7 new companions, the forest guardians. She blinked groggily, momentarily disoriented by her surroundings, the woven reed walls of the hut, the low embers in the small central fire pit, and the faint aroma of herbs drifting from clay pots arranged along one side. A gentle voice reached her ears. "You must be hungry, child. Come, eat." It belonged to the older woman who had welcomed her the night before. She beckoned Zuri toward a simple wooden table just outside the hut. Arrayed there were bowls of warm millet porridge, roasted groundnuts, and slices of fresh mango. Zuri's stomach rumbled at the sight. "Thank you," Zuri said, bowing her head respectfully. Despite the terror of the previous day, she felt an unexpected sense of calm in this tranquil forest clearing. The guardians, though cautious, seemed ready to help her. Her mind churned with questions: who were they, truly? How did they survive in this remote wilderness? And most of all, how long could she hide here from Queen Kamali's wrath? As she ate, the 7 forest dwellers introduced themselves more fully. There was Kwame, the broad forehead man who held a carved walking stick that signaled his role as a leader among them. The older woman was Mama Kolila, known for her knowledge of healing herbs and the forest secrets. Beside her stood Amare and Kioni, siblings who specialized in tracking game and gathering fruits from the highest branches. Then came Jahi, a solemn man with keen eyes for spotting danger, and Rahima, who said little but carried a small drum that she used to communicate through rhythms across the forest. Last of all was Faraji, a younger guardian who beamed in almost childlike excitement whenever Zuri spoke of the palace or the world beyond the forest. While they explained their roles, Zuri found her gaze drifting toward Mama Kolila's worn hands. The older woman gently massaged dried leaves between her fingers, releasing a mild fragrance. She reminded Zuri of the court herbalist back at the palace, who used to care for the late Queen Nambala with devotion. A pang of sorrow swept through the young princess at the memory of her mother. But she shook it off, determined to focus on the present. "All of you, thank you for taking me in," Zuri said once she'd finished her meal. "I promise I'll learn to help however I can. I don't want to be a burden." Kwame gave her a thoughtful look. "We live by the forest's grace," he explained. "Each one here has tasks that benefit the whole group. If you stay, you must do your part. Though you carry a royal name, you're a child of the land first, just like us." Those words sank into Zuri's heart. Never before had she been spoken to so plainly about work and responsibility. At the palace, everything had been brought to her, served to her. She realized she must adapt, or she would never survive here. "I understand," she said solemnly. "Show me what needs doing, and I'll do my best." Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, in the grand chambers of the Marula Kingdom's palace, Queen Kamali's frustration seethed. She paced back and forth across the polished floor, her golden bangles clinking with every agitated step. Before her stood Sanusi, looking paler than usual, having just returned with a beaded wristband in his satchel. "This belonged to the princess," he claimed, voice subdued, as he extended it to Kamali. "I found it, after I carried out your orders." Kamali's dark eyes narrowed. She snatched the wristband, examining it with practiced scrutiny. On the surface, it looked identical to the beaded design Zuri had worn, and indeed, it matched the color scheme the king had commissioned for his daughter: ochre, ivory, and a thin line of turquoise in the pattern. Satisfied, she turned the band over in her palm. Yet an odd twinge of doubt tugged at her mind. She sniffed, then lifted her gaze to lock eyes with Sanusi. "You are certain?" Her tone was ice. "There is no chance she escaped?" Sanusi bowed low, feigning confidence he did not feel. "None, Your Majesty. The wild creatures will handle whatever is left." "Very well," Kamali pronounced, though her jaw remained tense. "You have done your duty. Leave." The moment Sanusi departed, Kamali hurried to the secret storeroom in the palace's eastern wing. She could not shake the uneasy feeling that clung to her like a stubborn shadow. There, hidden from prying eyes, rested the ebony mirror, its ornate blackwood frame etched with serpents and star symbols. She lit several candles and myrrh incense, letting the smoke curl around her in a pungent, spiraling dance. Carefully, she uncovered the mirror, inhaling to steady her breath. At first, its surface reflected only her own face, drawn tight with anticipation. Then, as she whispered the familiar incantation, the ripples began to stir. "Ebony mirror," she intoned, "speak to me. I ask again, who is the fairest in all the land?" For a brief moment, the mirror stayed dark, as though reluctant to answer. Then a faint glow emanated from its depths, and the soft voice returned. "Lady Kamali, your beauty is famed far and wide, yet you still ask in vain. For the radiance of Princess Zuri shines on, hidden from your gaze. Indeed, she lives, and her spirit grows stronger every day." Kamali gasped in fury, her eyes blazing. "No." She clutched the mirror's edges so forcefully that her knuckles turned white. Sanusi's ruse had been exposed. The princess lived. With a furious hiss, Kamali wrapped the ebony mirror in its cloth, extinguishing its glow. She flung the storeroom door open so violently that it banged against the wall, sending echoes through the empty corridor. "This changes nothing," she snarled under her breath. "I will find her. And once I do, there will be no mercy." Back in the hidden forest clearing, days passed as Zuri tried to adapt to her new life among the 7 guardians. Each morning, she rose with the sun to gather roots and berries alongside Kioni and Amore, absorbing their knowledge of edible plants versus poisonous ones. She learned how to filter water from the stream using a hollowed gourd and heated stones, then carried it back to the communal hut. In the afternoons, Mama Kolila taught her to blend simple poultices from crushed herbs to treat scrapes and insect bites. Even chores were educational, sweeping leaves away from the hut's entrance protected against snakes that sometimes slithered through the underbrush. Jolly instructed her in the basics of forest survival, pointing out signs of hidden danger, fresh paw prints from leopards, hornbill calls signaling changes in weather, and termite mounds that signaled shifting soil. Gradually, Zuri found that each day's tasks felt less like a burden and more like a path towards self-reliance. Yet at night, when she lay on the woven sleeping mat, thoughts of home flooded her mind. She remembered her father's gentle smile, the palace's vibrant courtyards, and the way people would greet her with respect. Most of all, she yearned for his comforting presence, the father who had always made her feel safe. Somewhere in the recesses of her heart, she clung to the hope that King Ikandeo would discover the truth and save her from this exile. The guardians sensed Zuri's quiet sadness but respected her silence. They offered companionship and guidance without prying into her royal memories. In return, she began to see them as a second family, kind, industrious souls bound by their duty to protect the forest's balance. Over shared meals around the fire, they told stories of ancient spirits and hidden grottos with healing springs. Zuri found solace in these legends, imagining that somewhere within these sacred woods, perhaps her mother's spirit watched over her. Unbeknownst to all in that peaceful clearing, Queen Kamali was already hatching a new plan, one that involved dark sorcery and the cunning art of disguise. The ebony mirror had spoken, Zuri yet lived, her beauty and compassion blossoming beyond Kamali's reach. The queen's envy, stoked anew, would soon unleash dangerous forces. But for now, under the watchful eyes of the towering baobabs and the guardian's guiding wisdom, Zuri slept a hopeful sleep, unaware that a storm of malice gathered at the gates of the Marula kingdom, poised to strike once more. Nights passed in the deep forest, a tranquil hush broken only by nocturnal creatures and the soft crackle of the guardian's campfires. Princess Zuri gradually settled into this new life, practicing all that Kwame, Mama Kolila, and the others taught her. By day, she helped gather wild yams and tubers, learning to scrape the soil gently so the forest's delicate balance would remain undisturbed. By dusk, she joined them around the fire, listening raptly to tales of ancient ancestors who once roamed these very lands. Each story was rich with wisdom, and her respect for nature, and her newfound companions, grew in kind. Yet beyond the forest's boundary, trouble brewed. Queen Kamali had discovered that her steps into deception were far from finished. The ebony mirror's declaration that Zuri still lived ate at her soul like a slow poison. Night after night, Kamali secluded herself in her hidden chamber, chanting incantations, plotting ways to pinpoint Zuri's location. The Marula kingdom's court, oblivious to Kamali's dark intentions, assumed the young princess was dead. King Ikandeo grieved openly, his pain deepening the lines on his once cheerful face. Still, Kamali could not simply abduct an entire search party and comb the forest without raising suspicion. She required stealth, something more insidious than mere swords and men. She remembered fragments of lore passed down in her native land of Katembo, tales of powerful illusions and shape-shifting illusions that could trick even the keenest eye. Over the course of weeks, Kamali gathered ingredients to brew a potent concoction: dried cobra venom from the desert, crushed petals of a rare night-blooming flower, and resin from a tree believed to harbor vengeful spirits. When the mixture was ready, she tested it by dipping a small iron dagger into the brew. Even the slightest pinprick on a rat's paw brought near instant paralysis. But it was not enough to simply coat a weapon. Zuri's guardians would never allow a threatening stranger to enter their domain unchallenged. Kamali needed a disguise and a ruse. So, one moonlit evening, she turned to the ebony mirror once again, unraveling a hidden incantation to mask her appearance. As she chanted, she felt her body grow warm, as though flames were licking at her skin from the inside. Slowly, her reflection changed, her regal bearing melted into the stooped stance of an aging peddler woman. Her face withered, wrinkles appearing like cracks in parched earth. Her fine garments shifted to coarse, tattered robes in the mirror's gleaming surface. She let out a raspy breath, disgusted by this unsightly form, yet pleased. If the illusions held, not even the sharp-eyed guardians would recognize her. Next, Kamali reached for a ripe Marula fruit she had prepared. Its sweet fragrance could lure anyone on a hot afternoon. Carefully, she dipped the fruit stem into her vile brew, allowing just enough poison to seep into its flesh. The queen smiled grimly, a single bite would bring Zuri to her knees. Days later, as the noonday sun beat down on the forest canopy, Zuri and her guardians went about their daily tasks. Amare, Kioni, and Johi ventured deeper into the bush to track a herd of antelope, hoping to secure meat to smoke and store for the coming weeks. Mama Kolila stayed behind to tend to her herb garden near the hut, while Kwame and Rahima embarked on a trip to collect clay for potmaking. Faraji, enthusiastic and youthful, offered to escort Zuri to gather fresh water from a nearby spring. As they walked among the towering baobabs, the birdsong overhead seemed unusually subdued. Perhaps the forest sensed an intruder. Eventually, Faraji parted ways with Zuri, following the stream to check on the fish traps he had set days before. Zuri filled a pair of water gourds, one balanced on her head, the other tucked under her arm. She hummed a gentle tune Mama Kolila had taught her, grateful for the peaceful routine that had become her refuge. Suddenly, she caught sight of a figure hobbling along the edge of the clearing, a bent old woman leaning on a walking stick. Her tattered robes dragged in the dust. Zoe's instincts sparked caution, but her compassionate heart took over. Rarely did anyone else venture into this remote part of the forest, so it was unusual to see a lone traveler, especially one who appeared frail. "Grandmother," Zoe called, stepping closer. "Are you lost?" The figure turned slowly, revealing a deeply lined face, watery eyes, and quivering lips, though beneath the illusion, Kamali's heart thundered with triumph. She had found Zoe at last. Feigning a fragile cough, the disguised queen croaked, "Bless you, child. These old bones got turned around on the path. The forest is a maze to me." Zoe placed her gourds aside and approached, concern etching her features. "Come, rest under this tree. I have water." She offered the elder a small drinking cup from her pouch, a courtesy she had learned from the guardians. Kamali, stooping even more, pretended to sip the water. Inwardly, she fought the urge to smirk. So far, her disguise held. She reached into a tattered woven basket slung over one shoulder. "Thank you, dear girl," she wheezed. "I have something for you in return. A token of my gratitude. I've carried these sweet fruits across many leagues, would you like one?" From the basket, she produced the Marula fruit, its glossy skin golden in the sunlight. The tangy sweet scent wafted towards Zoe, making her mouth water. But a trace of weariness remained. She recalled the guardian's warnings about strangers. Still, this was just an old woman, hungry and tired. What harm could a single fruit do? Zoe hesitated, then accepted the offering. "Thank you. That's very generous." Kamali's pulse raced. One bite. That's all it would take. Yet just before Zoe raised the Marula fruit to her lips, a rustling in the bushes startled them both. Faraji emerged, arms full of fish he had pulled from the traps. His gaze fell on the stranger, and he stiffened. He had never seen an old peddler woman in these woods. Caution flickered in his expression. "Zoe," he said quietly, "who is this?" "I'm not sure," Zoe replied, turning to him with the fruit still in her hand. "She said she lost her way. She gave me this as a gift." Faraji set down the fish. "We should bring her to Mama Kolila," he said, trying to keep his tone neutral. "She'll know if all is well." Kamali cursed inwardly. Time was slipping away. If that old crone of a healer examined her, the illusions might unravel under suspicion. She had to act now. Rasping a forced laugh, she stepped back, lifting her walking stick defensively. No need, she croaked. "I must be on my way. But please, enjoy the fruit for my sake." She shot a final glance at Zoe, daring her to bite. Without further ado, she feigned a clumsy retreat into the forest, leaning heavily on her stick as she disappeared into the undergrowth. Faraji moved to follow, but found only thick vines and towering trees. The woman was gone. Zoe frowned, still holding the fruit. "It looks so delicious," she admitted. "It might be fine," Faraji said, "but Mama Kolila told us never to accept food from strangers in the forest." The two carefully wrapped the Marula fruit in a spare cloth, deciding to show it to Mama Kolila first. As they headed back, Zoe's heart thumped with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Something about the encounter didn't sit right. Little did she realize just how narrowly she had escaped Kamali's trap, and how determined the queen would be to strike again. For now, the forest's old spirits watched silently from the shadows. Zoe's story was not destined to end here. The guardians had unknowingly thwarted Kamali's first attempt on the princess's life, but a darker trial lay ahead, one that would test Zuri's strength and the bonds of friendship she had forged in this hidden realm of towering baobabs and whispered legends. The forest clearing glowed with the golden light of late afternoon as Zuri and Faraji returned from their encounter with the disguised Queen Kamali. Worried by the strange old woman's sudden appearance, they hurried to show the suspicious Marula fruit to Mama Kalila. One glance at the glossy peel was enough for the wise healer to sense danger. She spoke quietly of dark magic and venomous potions, her seasoned fingers brushing over the fruit stem where a faint, toxic residue clung. Zuri's skin prickled with realization. Queen Kamali must have come here under an illusion, prepared to end her life once and for all. Although Zuri had narrowly escaped, she knew her stepmother's cruelty would not rest until she had triumphed or been stopped. Mama Kalila destroyed the fruit by casting it into the fire. The acrid smoke that rose was enough to make everyone's eyes water. An ominous sign, indeed. That same evening, Kwame and the others gathered in their hut to discuss what must be done. They had come to love Zuri like one of their own, an industrious girl, quick to learn, humble despite her royal birth. Letting her walk blindly into Kamali's next trap felt unthinkable. Yet to storm the palace head-on would be an equally grave risk, for Kamali's command over the ebony mirror granted her fearsome powers. "I have to return," Zuri murmured, her voice steady despite the tears brimming in her eyes. "If Kamali has lied about my fate, she is free to rule my father's kingdom unchecked. My people deserve to know the truth. I cannot hide here forever." She looked at the guardians, who nodded in reluctant agreement. The forest dwellers did not fear difficulty. Their entire existence was one of balance and harmony with nature's challenges. If Zuri felt it was her destiny to reclaim her place, they would stand by her. Their plan crystallized. They would travel secretly at night, using trails unfamiliar to the palace guards. With Johi and Kioni scouting ahead, they could slip through side gates at dawn. At the heart of this plan lay a single objective: confront the queen, reveal Zuri to King Ikandeo, and break Kamali's hold over the kingdom. On the chosen night, the party of 8 slipped quietly out of the forest. Torches or lanterns would have drawn too much attention, so they relied on moonlight and the guardians' expert knowledge of the terrain. Branches snapped underfoot, and now and then, a distant owl hooted, but otherwise the journey was silent. Eventually, the spires of the Marula Kingdom's palace broke the horizon, their outlines faintly illuminated by torches atop the outer walls. As dawn lightened the sky, Johi spotted a lesser-used entrance behind the granaries. One by one, they crept inside until they were deep in the courtyard, ducking behind tall earthen jars and weaving through lines of drying maize. Zuri's heart pounded at the thought of seeing her father again, and at the peril that awaited them if Kamali discovered their presence. But fate had other plans. Even as they neared the throne room, a cadre of guards leaped forward, led by none other than the remorseful tracker, Sanusi. Alarmed, Zuri's friends braced for a fight. However, Sanusi made a show of lowering his spear. "Princess," he whispered hoarsely, bowing. "I owe you my life. The queen would kill me if she knew I had spared you. I will help you see your father, but we must hurry." Hustled through marble corridors, Zuri could scarcely breathe. At last, they burst into the grand hall. King Ikandeo, surrounded by advisors, startled at the sudden intrusion. A hush fell, broken only by the echo of footsteps. When the king saw his daughter, alive, grown, and trembling with emotion, his eyes brimmed with tears. He rushed forward, arms outstretched. "Zuri," he cried, voice cracking. "My child. I thought I had lost you." Before father and daughter could embrace, the ornate doors at the opposite end of the hall slammed open. Queen Kamali swept in, her face twisted in fury. Gone was the kindly facade. She raised her hand, and a swirl of dark energy shimmered around her. Palace guards tensed, confused by the spectacle. Then, from beneath Kamali's robes, she produced the ebony mirror. "You dare return?" Kamali snarled. "I will not be robbed of my throne." Energy crackled in the air as she invoked the mirror's power. "Mirror, mirror, in this ebony frame," she chanted, "aid me and bring this child to her final doom." A pulse of darkness rumbled through the hall, knocking several people to the ground. Yet Zuri stood firm, the guardians rallying around her. Mama Kalila, fear flashing in her wise eyes, reached into her satchel of herbs. She flung a handful of pungent powder into the air, protection from malevolent spirits, taught to her by generations of healers. A gust of wind swept across the throne room, scattering the powder in swirling patterns of golden sparks. Kamali shrieked as the ebony mirror's surface began to splinter. The swirl of protective herbs clashed with her dark incantations, unraveling the illusions she had so carefully woven. In a flash, her reflection cracked, echoing through the chamber in a deafening rattle. Shards of glass fell to the floor, and with them, Kamali's remaining power fractured. She collapsed, wrecked by the consequences of her own forbidden magic. King Ikandeo hurried to Zuri's side, tears of relief streaming down his cheeks. The guards, stunned, rushed forward to restrain Kamali. The ebony mirror, once the source of her deadly envy, lay in ruins. In the hush that followed, father and daughter finally embraced. Within hours, word spread throughout the Marula kingdom, the princess had returned, alive and well, exonerating the palace tracker, Sanusi, of wrongdoing. Queen Kamali's villainy, at last exposed, led to her banishment from the land. Through the courage of Zuri and her loyal companions, the Marula kingdom was spared further suffering. A grand feast was declared, a celebration of reconciliation and renewal. Zuri's forest guardians were honored as heroes, though they humbly wished only to return to their cherished trees and streams. Before they left, Zuri embraced each one, tears of gratitude in her eyes. "Because of you," she said, voice full of reverence, "I have lived to see my father again. I will never forget your bravery, nor the lessons you've taught me." This African retelling of Snow White teaches us that kindness, humility, and unity can triumph even over the darkest envy. Queen Kamali's jealousy consumed her and led to her downfall, whereas Zuri's gentle spirit and the guardian's steadfast loyalty preserved what truly mattered: love, life, and the well-being of the kingdom. In a world that often tests our hearts, we must remember that compassion shines brighter than any desire for power or admiration. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the Snow White tale, retold with the vibrant spirit of Africa. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more enchanting folktales, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another episode. Drop a comment below sharing your favorite moment or lesson from Zuri's adventure. We can't wait to hear from you.